Today, we're really digging into the legacy of Steve Jobs. It's enduring, but wow, is it complex?
Absolutely. We've pulled together a whole range of sources, articles, biographies, interviews,
Right.
to try and get a handle on the multifaceted impact of this guy. He was truly iconic.
Yeah, iconic is the word.
Our goal here isn't just to rehash the same old stories. We want to peel back the layers a bit.
Okay.
We'll look at his unique take on tech and design, that, well, demanding leadership style he was famous for.
Infamous, maybe.
Aha, maybe both. And also his personality, how his early life shaped him, some of the tougher ethical questions around his career,
Mm-hmm.
and of course the massive global footprint he left across so many industries.
Exactly. I mean, Steve Jobs, the name itself just means innovation,
He
transformation.
really does.
But as we'll get into, his story is just full of these fascinating contradictions. It's not straightforward.
Not at all.
Okay, let's unpack this. Where should we start? Maybe with the foundation, his actual vision. What made it unique?
Yeah, let's start there. What's really key, I think, is his core idea that technology by itself,
Right,
it just wasn't the whole picture.
right.
He famously said, technology alone is not enough. You remember the rest.
It's technology married with the liberal arts, married with the humanities.
Exactly. That yields us the results that make our hearts sing. That fundamental concept, linking tech know-how with,
Yeah.
understanding people, beauty,
Aesthetics.
yes, aesthetics. That was so central to everything he drove.
And it led to this incredible intuition he had, focusing on the user.
Totally. Almost uncanny. He had that famous line about customers not knowing what they want.
Yeah, it's not the customer's job.
Right. He felt he had to envision it for them, which was, pretty different from others who were all about market research.
Definitely a departure. But it seemed to come from this deep sense of what people might want, even if they couldn't articulate it.
And that conviction, it fueled this relentless drive for perfection
Hmm.
and focus, intense focus.
Oh, yeah. When he came back to Apple in '97.
Big changes. He just slashed the product line, concentrated everything on just a few key things.
That wasn't just about cutting costs, was it?
No. It was about focus. Pouring all their energy, all that design brilliance into making a few things absolutely amazing. It was a masterclass in focus, really. Laser-like.
Just think about that first iMac, the Bondi Blue one.
Oh, yeah.
In a world of beige boxes, suddenly there's this beautiful thing and no floppy drive.
Right. People thought that was crazy then. Considered it essential.
But that was classic Jobs, wasn't it? Just challenging the norms based on where he saw things going.
And you see that intuitive leap again and again. The Macintosh.
With the graphical interface?
Yeah, which he'd seen the potential of at Xerox, of course. Making computers accessible, not just command lines.
Totally changed the game.
Then the iPod and iTunes, completely reshaped the music industry. That seamless device plus the store.
And the iPhone. Remember the skepticism?
Oh, absolutely. People were like, a phone, a music player, and the internet with just touch.
But he was convinced that multi-touch interface.
Revolutionary.
Yeah.
Just swiping and pinching. It felt so natural. It really kicked off the whole smartphone era we live in now.
It really did.
And then, the App Store, the iPad, he just kept anticipating where things were headed with media, with mobile computing.
He had this knack, didn't he? Creating things you didn't even know you needed until you held them.
Exactly.
It's staggering how many industries he shook up. People compare him to Edison, Ford.
And Isaacson, in his biography, lists at least 7, right? Personal computing, animation with Pixar,
Music, phones, tablets.
retail with the Apple stores, digital publishing. That kind of impact across the board, it's incredibly rare.
Truly unique. But that visionary side, it definitely had a flip side, didn't it? The way he led, the atmosphere he created.
Yeah, that's the other crucial piece. How was this vision actually brought to life? Inside Apple, it wasn't just admiration he inspired. There was, a lot of fear, too.
Right.
There's that quote from engineer Michael Dewey. He said Jobs was crystal clear about what he didn't like.
Uh-huh.
If he was bored in a meeting, he'd bluntly say, "This is crap, let's move on." Just zero patience for anything he thought was subpar.
And that wasn't just in meetings, it sounds like. It seeped into the culture.
Oh, definitely. Created this palpable pressure. You hear those stories.
The elevator rides.
Exactly. Employees dreading getting in an elevator with him, afraid they couldn't impress him in, 30 seconds?
Yeah.
His management style was just uncompromising. He demanded A players only.
The whole A players hire A players, hire C players thing.
That was his mantra. And it meant he had zero tolerance for anyone he didn't think was up to scratch. People said his feedback was extreme. Either you were brilliant or
Or you were, in his words, shit.
pretty much.
Yeah.
Very little in between. Polarizing.
Which led some people to call him, a classic toxic leader, bullying, needing control, not much empathy.
There are definitely accounts that paint that picture. Outbursts, needing to dictate everything.
And then you have the other side, the loyalists.
Right. People like Andy Cunningham. She admitted he was harsh, demanding,
Yeah.
but she also called working with him phenomenal an honor.
Because of the results.
Yeah, she emphasized the incredible things they achieved together, despite the pressure. Or maybe because of it, in her view.
It sounds like his style wasn't static, though. It changed over his career. Can we track that?
Yeah, definitely. You can kind of see phases. Early Apple, say 76 to 85.
Yeah.
That was young Jobs. Abrasive, unfiltered.
The reality distortion field era.
Exactly. Intense focus on the Mac, high expectations, but also a lot of friction. It contributed to him being pushed out in 85. Some saw him as a callow businessman, divisive, undisciplined.
Okay, so then he's out. Next T and Pixar time, 85 to 96. Did that change him?
Well, he was still demanding, for sure, but there seems to have been maybe a dose of humility.
How so?
Next, he wasn't a huge commercial hit, right? So maybe some lessons in practicality there.
Yeah.
At Pixar, he clashed with the creative folks at first, but eventually learned to trust them, step back a bit.
So learning collaboration, maybe some emotional intelligence growth.
Seems like it. It suggests some development. Even people he'd clashed with earlier sometimes spoke admiringly later. So a shift, even if that core intensity was still there.
And then the big return, the Apple Renaissance, 97 to 2011, the comeback.
Right. And he was definitely wiser, more experienced. He restructured things dramatically, broke down those silos, the whole one Apple push. Still demanded excellence, could still be tough, absolutely. But colleagues also noted more maturity. He delegated more to key people like Joni Ive, Tim Cook.
Okay.
So the rough edges were still there, but maybe coupled with the stronger ability to inspire real loyalty. And obviously, overseeing Apple's most incredible innovations.
Even if people got chewed out, they often recognized his dedication to the product.
That seems to be the case for many. His commitment was undeniable.
So, just a difficult guy.
Yeah.
Or is it more complicated? How do we square that with modern ideas about leadership?
Yeah, it's tough. By today's standards, parts of his style would definitely be flagged, criticized heavily.
For sure.
But then you look at the results, the sheer scale of the success. It makes a simple judgment really hard. Isaacson suggested maybe his legacy is more about that visionary passion than the management tactics themselves.
So maybe sometimes that kind of demanding, even difficult leadership can lead to amazing things in rare cases.
It's a provocative thought. It certainly makes you think about the link between personality and achievement.
Absolutely. Let's dive deeper into that personality, the inner conflicts, maybe.
Yeah, the contradictions are fascinating. Charismatic, yet confrontational. Inspiring, but troubled.
Complex, but definitely. And his adoption seems really key.
Huge factor. Knowing he was adopted from a young age really shaped his self-image. He had that famous realization.
I wasn't abandoned, I was chosen, I was special.
Exactly. That seemed to give him this immense self-belief, independence.
But you wonder, did it also fuel a need for control, for constant validation?
It's definitely something psychologists consider. Even with loving adoptive parents, that core experience, it might have played into his intense need for control. He himself said it made him feel independent.
And that binary thinking, brilliant or shit.
Right. That seemed to show up everywhere. In his moods, his feedback, and sometimes a real lack of empathy.
Isaacson called him petulant, very, very mean sometimes. The story about the waiter.
Yeah. And a former girlfriend called him enlightened but also cruel. That strange mix.
Like the hippie ideals in Zen Buddhism on one hand, and then this abrasive, ego-driven persona on the other. Even back at Atari, right? His hygiene, his attitude, they put him on the night shift.
Yeah, to keep him away from everyone else. It's quite a picture.
And then there's the reality distortion field, that almost hypnotic ability to convince people the impossible was possible.
Right, which, yes, it drove incredible achievements, pushed teams way beyond what they thought they could do.
It could also feel manipulative, ignored reality sometimes.
Could be seen that way, definitely. But then you have Andy Hertzfeld saying the Mac team loved working 90 hours a week and loving it. So he could motivate intensely, even through pressure.
Did getting cancer change him at all? That diagnosis in 2003 must have had an impact.
People definitely noticed some shifts. Facing mortality,
Mm-hmm.
it seemed to make him more introspective.
Mm-hmm.
He reconnected properly with his daughter, Lisa. His wife, Lorene Powell Jobs, talked about his regret, wishing he'd been a better father earlier.
That sounds like a softening, seeking connection.
It does seem that way. Lorene said having Lisa there in his final years was a real comfort to him. And Isaacson observed him grappling with legacy, saying money mattered less. He even made amends, apologies, peace with rivals like Bill Gates.
So some humility came through.
Glimpses, yeah. But it wasn't like a total personality transplant. He stayed fiercely dedicated to Apple, planning for its future, even setting up Apple University for after he was gone.
So mortality maybe humbled him in some ways, led to more appreciation for people.
But that core intensity, that drive, that persisted right to the end.
It's such a complex picture. Which brings us to some of the, let's say, ethical sticking points in his career. It wasn't all just innovation and keynotes, right?
Yeah, unfortunately not. There are some really significant incidents that raise big questions, especially how he treated some early collaborators.
Like the Atari thing with Wozniak, the breakout game.
Exactly. Wozniak did the incredible engineering work thinking they'd split a big bonus.
Oh.
But Jobs, well, he wasn't truthful about how much Atari paid.
He kept most of it.
Yeah, significantly more. Wozniak found out later and was understandably really hurt by it, said it was more about the dishonesty than the money itself.
Ouch. That points to, well, a willingness to put himself first, even over loyalty to a close friend.
And it wasn't a one-off, sadly. Think about the Apple IPO. Stock options for early employees.
Right, he excluded some key people.
Yes. People like Daniel Kotke, who was a friend, and they're from the very beginning.
Yeah.
Just left out of the initial stock grants.
Seriously, why?
Jobs just decided against it. When another exec offered to give Kotke some of his stock if Jobs matched it, Jobs apparently said, okay, I will give him zero. Just cold.
Wow. So what happened?
It was Wozniak again. He ended up giving away millions, like $10 million of his own stock to the people Jobs had excluded. Just said it was the right thing to do.
Good for Woz.
Yeah.
But it highlights a pattern with Jobs. And it wasn't just money, was it? Recognition, too.
Exactly. Many early team members felt their contributions got buried under the huge Steve Jobs story. And even his relationship with Woz, while they stayed friendly publicly, reportedly grew distant. Woz mentioned feeling a lack of personal appreciation from Jobs over the years.
Okay, then there's the whole manufacturing side. Foxconn.
Yeah, that became a major issue. The conditions in those factories in China, reports of really tough working environments, long hours, intense pressure, and then the worker suicides in 2010.
That was deeply troubling. How did Jobs respond?
Initially, pretty defensively. He famously said, Foxconn is not a sweatshop. Described the facilities as pretty nice, mentioned pools and movie theaters.
Which felt like it was minimizing the very real concerns about worker stress and well-being.
It did to many critics. It seemed to downplay the human cost of producing these devices at such scale and speed.
Did things change?
Apple did implement changes, audits, supplier codes of conduct, especially after the public pressure mounted. But critics argued it was often reactive, and the core tension between profit margins, production speed, and worker welfare, that remained. The focus under Jobs was always relentlessly on the product.
And that relentless focus, it impacted his personal life too, didn't it? His daughter, Lisa.
That's a really difficult part of the story, his early denial of paternity.
For years, right. He even claimed in court documents he was sterile.
Yes, and provided very little support initially. They did reconcile later in life, thankfully. But Lisa Brennan Jobs wrote about that lasting feeling of not being wanted, not being compelling enough for him.
That's heartbreaking. And it seems like that pattern work first, relationship second, affected others too.
It appears so. Friendships strained, like with Kotke. And the demands on Apple employees themselves. Burnout was common. People who didn't meet his standards could just be cut off, dismissed abruptly.
So it begs that tough question. Was that intensity, that willingness to sideline personal stuff, somehow necessary for what he achieved?
It's impossible to know for sure, right? Many would argue vehemently that great leadership doesn't require denying your child or mistreating people.
Of course not.
But in Jobs' specific case, he often seemed to operate by compartmentalizing, pushing personal things aside in this incredibly focused pursuit of his vision, whether that was a requirement for his success or just a damaging flaw. It's a deep ethical question.
So putting it all together, the vision, the flaws, the impact, what's the ultimate legacy? He's clearly more than just a tech CEO.
Oh, absolutely. Despite all the controversies, the sheer scale of his impact is undeniable. Historians, business leaders, they put him up there with Edison, with Henry Ford, people who didn't just tweak things, but fundamentally changed industries and how we live.
And we listed them earlier, 7 industries at least.
Right. Personal computing, animation, music, phones, tablets, retail, digital publishing.
The whole Donny 99 song model, the App Store ecosystem.
Yeah, the Harvard Business Review said he helped transform 7 industries and belongs in the pantheon of America's great innovators. It's hard to argue with that breadth of influence.
But, as we've discussed, that success had a human cost for the teams at Apple.
Definitely. Those long hours, the intense pressure, it led to burnout for many. Even if they also felt huge creative fulfillment, the psychological toll was real. Remember those t-shirts? 90 hours a week and loving it.
Yeah, but there's probably a counter t-shirt too.
Probably 2 hours a week and loving it after they left.
Huh. And there was a cost to Jobs himself, arguably. His health, maybe. That relentless drive.
It's hard not to wonder, did that constant intensity contribute to his health issues? We can't know, but it's a thought.
So today, how do people see him? It feels like a mix.
It really is. A blend of awe and criticism. Visionary icon, but also, yeah, that great and demanding leader label comes up.
There was that period after he died, wasn't there? A bit of questioning the cult of Steve Jobs, warning against just copying his harshness.
Yes, a necessary recalibration, perhaps. Realizing that you can't just mimic the abrasive parts and expect genius results. His context was unique.
What do you think happens over time? How will he be remembered in, say, 50 years?
My guess, the mythic narrative, Jobs, the visionary, the innovator, that's likely to grow stronger. It tends to happen with figures like Edison or Ford or Disney. The rough edges sometimes get smoothed over by history.
And the enduring legacy of Apple itself.
That's the ultimate testament, isn't it? The
Yeah.
company he built, rebuilt, and infused with his values. It's still one of the most powerful forces in the world. That institutional legacy is immense.
So in the end, no easy label.
Not at all. Extraordinary gifts, extraordinary flaws. He left a huge mark.
He certainly achieved his goal, didn't he? I want to put a ding in the universe.
Undeniably. And we're all still feeling the ripples of that ding. It's going to last for a long, long time.
So, wrapping up this deep dive, we've really looked at Steve Jobs from a lot of angles. The incredible vision, the innovation.
Yeah, but also the complex, often contradictory leadership style, the personality.
And those significant ethical questions that came up throughout his career.
Right. And pulling it all together, that undeniable world-changing impact he had on so many different fields.
That leaves you thinking, doesn't it?
It really does. And maybe a final thought for you, listening. How much were his flaws tangled up with his genius? Could he have achieved all that with a totally different approach, maybe kinder, gentler? Or was that edge part of the package?
And what lessons are there, really, for leadership and innovation now? Can we learn from both the good and the bad?
Big questions. Definitely a lot to chew on.
For sure. Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive into Steve Jobs, his story, his legacy. It clearly continues to shape our world in really profound ways.